What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to The Standard, Episode 1. I'm here with our producer, Robert, and Off the Field's general manager, Auggie Francis, also one of the first athletes I ever had. This is Episode 1. Here we go. Biggest reason why I try to bring you on here is we've been talking about doing a podcast for like 10 years. You know, one of the things was I almost felt inadequate to do it. Some of my mentors are crazy, bright, brilliant, smart, and you're always been a guy who's just been like, no, you got to do it. You know, we've had some unique experiences, maybe different than other people with the volume of athletes and young athletes that we've been able to work with. So I just got to start by saying thanks for pushing me to do this, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor, honestly, especially to see, how you started with Off the Field and where it's came. I guess, little bit of a lack of confidence in starting this was rare for me to see. So just the fact that I could push you to go forward with it, I think is huge. So appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. A little background on Auggie. I was able to coach him when he was going to be a freshman in high school in baseball, and then trained him, worked him all the way through college, and then he ended up coaching with us, and now he's our general manager. Man, I appreciate everything you've done for us, and excited to see how today goes, and definitely the future moving forward with us.
Absolutely. First time I met Taylor was he was my first, I guess, high school coach ever. So as an 8th grader, I was able to try out for the high school summer team, and Taylor, yourself, and then a couple other younger guys. Dan, one of your really good boys, and then our JV coach was kind of the other guy. And my dad was real hesitant about me even like going on and playing high school baseball. And he's like, "Well, you're gonna have some young coaches, this and that." But fortunately, we had 3 stud coaches that were motivated young dudes that loved kids, loved baseball, and were effective with a big group. So. That was one of the most fun summers I had, so that was sweet.
Yeah, it was awesome. We had a nasty squad as well. Some of you guys helped build everything that we had. You know what I mean? It was really cool. And I know Rasmussen, our head coach, he was a giant mentor for me. Probably wouldn't be where I'm at if it weren't for him, and I know he was big for you guys as well.
So as far as when you were coaching, I think you were still in school at C of I studying to be a physical therapist. So was Off the Field even an idea when you were coaching me that summer, or was that kind of like when did your interest spark in that?
I actually went to Mountain View as well. I was a kid that wasn't that athletic, and I worked a lot harder, I felt like, than a lot of my friends, but they were way more athletic than me, and they'll attest to that. But I got injured twice in high school. I had surgery once in high school, and then I got injured again in college, and Tommy John in college, and so I really wanted to go into the therapy route, physical therapy.
Yeah.
Always had decent grades, and took the GRE when I graduated, and realized real quick that's not what I wanted to do. While I was in college, I got to jump and coach with Ras, you know what I mean? And as soon as I started working with kids, and I didn't know if it was going to be baseball, but I was like, all right, this is what I want to do. This is the motivation. This is where, I had people that believed in me when they probably shouldn't have, and when I could see that in some kids that didn't have a lot of confidence, and when all I had to do is tell them they were doing a good job, or hold them accountable to something and push them.
For sure.
And saw their standard raise, you know what I mean? I was like, all right, this is what I got to do. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. So out of college, I got an offer to work at a gym, which the offer wasn't big, getting paid almost nothing, working at a commercial gym, which is not really my cup of tea or my ticket, mm-hmm. and I saw how things were being ran there and the people that were above me, and I was like, that's not my manager. That's not who I wanted to be like. So I just kind of started flipping the script. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go try to snag some kids and see what I can do to help them get better. Every adult that I work with, I tried to treat them like an athlete, and we got a lot better results, a lot faster, mm-hmm. which was really cool and unique. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had a degree and a couple, BS certifications, but I was just pushing the people, and again, holding them accountable and making them consistent, and we were killing it. So then how Off the Field came, I met a guy that was working there as well. He built 3 of these performance clubs, not off the field, but something like it down south in Alabama, and told me about this idea, and we just kind of ran with it. We got every certification we could get. I got CSCS, NASM, CES, USAW, CrossFit, everything that I could possibly get just to break down their programming. And then actually how Off the Field started is we wanted to take that programming, see how we could reverse engineer it, and then put it into programming for kids in high schools and stuff like that. Because when we were in school, even with you, when you were in high school, we loved RAS to death, but sometimes the programming, it was more of what we were doing.
Yeah.
We was like, they have to have a better resource, and we wanted to be that. We did a certification for free with some coaches, and they were like, "Oh man, seems pretty cool." My dad actually was in the cert. I was like, "Dad, you got to come try this," and he's never really picked up a weight before, but I wanted him to just kind of tell me what I could do better.
Yeah.
And they loved it, but then they were like, how do we know this works? And I didn't have an answer for them. I'm like, well, it's really cool stuff, isn't it? And they were like, that don't matter. We got no results. So we had to figure out where to go. There was a space in a gym here in Idaho called Axiom that they were losing money at, and it was just kind of vacant. We got to go fill that space. We pretty much, it was almost free. It was if we made money, they made money. It was a revenue share, we were really lucky to be able to do that. And then long term, as we grew, it ended up being something where we had to figure out another avenue. But we just kind of ran with it from there, and that's where we started.
So going back a little bit to taking some of that programming, like from CrossFit and from some of your other certifications, and making it for athletes, did you have like working with big groups in mind? Because just being a part of Off the Field for a handful of years now, I feel like that's kind of one of our big things is working with a large group. And being able to control that was that kind of your envision when you started, is going after those big groups and working with teams and different things like that, or
Yep.
were you more so focused on like kind of individual athletes, like higher level athletes?
We're in Idaho, so we didn't have a ton of higher level athletes,
Except for myself. Just kidding.
No, but that was a good question. Literally, that's what we built everything on. Yeah. So it was like personal training at the time for a kid, not a lot of people could afford it. You know what I mean? And for us, we felt like to see success, you had to work 3 to 5 to 6 days a week.
Yeah.
And to be able to pay for that in personal training, the model wasn't there, and somebody who had the model was CrossFit. Now, we didn't want the kids to do CrossFit, but how they reverse engineered their programming to where they could get great results with a large amount of people in an efficient amount of time. We were like, okay, how can we do that with kids? Because we wanted to work with teams, and we knew in high schools you'd work with some fitness classes or PE classes. There's anywhere from 40 to 70 to 80 kids.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out how you do that, but we wanted to have the quality so high that it almost felt like it was like a one-on-one training session, or it almost felt like it was a semi-private training session, even though there was 40 kids. And now we haven't always hit that mark, but that's always been a goal, and still to this day, that's kind of our goal. We have now molded a little bit to, or I guess pivoted a little bit to the semi-privates, but we still, our number one population is teams. And we always tell our, as all my coaches, the number one goal is that everybody is treated the exact same.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to feel like they're our favorite.
Yeah.
So that kind of was the goal when we did first start.
Cool. The big groups. So what would you say helped you control those big groups, or really become confident in getting every kid out of these 40 kids to feel like their squat was the best, even though it may have not been? But first of all, even just getting 40 kids into a proper squat, what strategies, what did you find worked well? Where did you kind of run with that?
You can call it confidence, or probably arrogance, maybe cockiness back in the day, to where we felt no one could control a room like myself and my partner at the time. We were the loudest. We were direct. Everything we said had a reason to it. Something I still try to teach to this day. It's tough to teach. It's more like you can see by doing it.
Yeah.
The quality of the movement could never be sacrificed. So if we were going to do a squat that day, we didn't care if we'd spend a whole hour with that. We could make that intense to where we aren't moving on until we get past that. And it wasn't where you're just holding a squat, but to where it was everybody had to get in the right positions. Everybody was competing with each other, and we didn't have a set system, but we felt like we could do it. So I know, again, it feels like arrogance, but the level of strength conditioning coaching in Idaho at the time, we felt like was not where it should be, and we felt like we could easily be above that. We went and traveled, across the country to watch other people, and we're like, we could do that. We could do that better. They're smarter than me on the programming side, but I know I can get 50 kids to listen to me and get that buy-in. And it's kind of where we ran with it. And a lot of it was probably, to be honest with you, was like compensating and insecurities from my old lack of ability in athletics, you know what I mean? To where I was coming off where I was just this guy, you know?
Yeah.
But it really helped me figure out kind of who I was and started recognizing patterns on actually how to get kids to buy in and get that relationship and get that quality of movement. And I think it comes down, now just thinking about it, if the kids know we care, you know, then they're in. Whether we're teaching them some shit movement or not, like they're in, you know? And back then, some of the stuff I was doing with you, if we were doing now, I would fire my own ass, you know what I mean? But you knew I was at every practice. I was at every game, you know what I mean? And now, as we've grown, that's something that so lucky that my coaches, you, Robert, our producer, like you guys are at every game, even games we don't have to be at, because we love these kids. And I feel like that's where the kids, like, they know we're trying to figure out the best for them. You know, even if one day we're doing something and it wasn't right, you know what I mean? Everything is built around trying to get them better, and I feel like the kids trust that, you know? And so, yeah, I think I might have answered that question. I kind of ran around there a little bit.
But building that trust in the athletes goes a long way. I mean, I've heard you talk to other parents and other coaches that, you know, call us trainers, and you're not a huge fan of that. You're coaches, you know, not trainers, which I think there is a big difference, and I think coaches, like, put in a little bit more of that time and effort, go to your games, ask you how things outside of your sport are. And I do agree, like, even just as a youngster, as an 8th grader going into high school, seeing the guy that would kick my ass once or twice a week when I would roll into the gym, you know, seeing him at the games, it's like, oh, wow, dang, he actually wants to get me better at baseball. He actually wants to help me get a scholarship, whatever it may be. And that's stayed true since I've even been working at off the field. I think it's been really cool. So going back to that space over at the Axiom, was that your guys' first spot? And did you start there by yourself, or was that you and your partner kind of jumped into that spot together and ran with it?
Yeah, so, you know, we actually started working in the back of this shed on all the programming, have whiteboards all over the wall, trying to figure out, okay, how can we get these groups in? How did CrossFit do it? How did these gyms do it? How did these successful places do it? What are these gyms that aren't doing so well doing? You know what I mean? How could we make them better? And then when we got into that space, we had no kids. So we went to people that we knew, you know. So Mountain View Baseball, Mountain View Lacrosse, Timberline Baseball. We trained all 3 of those teams for free. When we first started, we thought we knew what we were doing. Looking back, we had no idea what we were doing. Luckily, all 3 of those teams won. You know, they all had really, really good years. Timberline won the state title. Mountain View was a game away from the state title, and Lacrosse never lost a game. You know, we dominated.
Yeah.
Luckily, all 3 teams had some crazy talent. We can't take all the credit there, but then we did. You know, we thought it was us, and really it kind of exploded from there. And it was just like the coolest thing ever. So we'd be in there from 5 a.m. till 9 at night. We had no idea what we were doing. We were working with adults, working with kids. Every single person that we could get in front of, we were doing it. We were getting after them. You know, every school, we were teaching fitness classes. We were teaching PE classes. You know, we just opened up a new space, you know, this month. And it was so cool because we're in a new area. I went to Timberline High School to go teach their fitness class like I used to teach your fitness classes back in the day. And we started teaching. We just started working with these kids, and it was awesome. Again, not getting paid a penny, but really just getting them to see who we are.
Yeah.
You know, I think what really
get the name out there a little.
Yeah, 100%. I think what really changed us was Mountain View football. Judd Benedict kind of took a risk on us. My first summer with them, they gave me a 5-minute speed station for free, and so I got to see 100-something kids between the freshmen and the older guys, and I only had 5 minutes at a time. And in my head, I'm like, 5 minutes is all you give me. What am I going to do? And so I was like, okay, every kid wants to run a faster 40. So everything that I'm going to do is going to be built around the 40-yard dash. You know what I mean? I'm going to get them that get their start right.
Yeah.
Because 1, I think it can help them with acceleration. But 2, the kids are going to love me. Whether the coach does it or not, the kid thinks I can get his 40 faster, he's going to come in,
Sign
right?
me up.
So we just, for 3 months straight, worked on the start of the 40 to where every kid could rip it. I didn't have to say anything. Our first 10 yards, our setup, everything was awesome and perfect. And even the start then I've changed drastically now to what I used to do. But that's what I did. Next year, Judd, for free again, gave me a 30-minute speed station. So now I got a group for 30 minutes. And then after that, we got the whole football team. And then, you know, once you get a football team in a school, it kind of grows from there. That's where we kind of started getting a real name, I think, in the Valley. That's where we started working with some higher level athletes, and we had, you know, a little bit of our foot in the ground. There wasn't really anybody around, at the time, so we were lucky in that category. We were able to make some mistakes and learn from them. But really, like, the story, I guess. So I had a partner who was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. One, he was crazy smart. He was about 10 years older than me. But then we didn't align in a few areas morally. A bunch of different things happened to where I had to separate myself from him. And it was rough, man. So we were 4 or 5 years in, 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. We were doing payroll, training everybody. One time he just bounced for a month, and I had 5 different groups that I had to work with at the same time by myself. I didn't have one coach. And looking back, like, I was stressed about it, but like thinking now, like, it was so awesome. Like, I wish that I was documenting or knew what I was going through at the time, because it was such a phenomenal opportunity to be able to work with, you know, the at the time Nova's soccer club, this football team, this lacrosse team, an NFL player, all together at the same time, and having to navigate that in a tiny space and make sure we got results. It made me such a better coach, you know. So
Yeah.
it was about 4 or 5 years in. Ended up starting back over at zero. Didn't have a penny. And it was either change the name or keep my clients. I remember pulling over to the side of the road with my mom and being calling her, like, crying, like, Mom, I put everything. I skipped grad school. I skipped all these job opportunities. While I was working there, I would get these job offers and stuff, and to where I would probably have been paid way higher at the beginning, you know what I mean? But I was like, I love this, and now I have no money. Now I have nothing, and I didn't even have a place to stay. And I was like, Mom, what do I do? And my mom's like, you're gonna kill this, you know what I mean? And I knew from right there, it's like, as long as I don't quit, like, I'm gonna figure this out. And I had this guy, Steve Marlowe, who's probably been one of the biggest influences on off the field, and he talked to me, and he's like, I need to, now that it's just me, it's like, what are my core values? And he taught me the meaning of serving, and not, you know, being at a soup kitchen line or something like that, but really putting other people's interests in front of your own. So I hired 2 coaches. I tried to make sure those guys were full, make sure that everybody knew how great they were, and I did everything I possibly could for them, and did everything I could possibly do for the athletes. And literally from there, we just kind of exploded. You know, within 3 years from that, I was 10 times farther than I was the 4 or 5 years before that. You know what I mean? So literally, it was. Like I said, the partner was one of the best and worst things that ever happened to me, but I definitely wouldn't be here if it weren't for him and some of those late nights and all that craziness. It was huge.
Yeah, I faintly remember walking in for 6 a.m. lifts, and you're, still asleep on the couch probably from training the night before. So I've kind of seen on how much effort you put in and how much grind you put into off the field. Tell me, like, kind of where maybe you got or what kept you saying, like, I got to just keep working, I got to keep going? Not only, obviously that conversation with your mom was probably a big spark, but what pushed you through those sleeping at the gym nights, the 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., doing everything from coaching to payroll to trying to grow your own business? Like, what kept you rolling? What's maybe your motivation?
Yeah, I love that question. So it 100% starts from my parents. My dad is still to this day the hardest working guy I've ever met, and my mom always thought I was the greatest. Like, my mom still thinks I should be a quarterback for the 49ers. Turns out I wasn't near that good, but she thinks I am. But it was, my dad got kicked out when he was 14, just because his mom thought that he was old enough to live on his own, and he's had to do everything for himself. I'd never had to do. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, but I never once didn't have something that I needed, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they did everything for me. My dad would work before I left the school, come home late. My mom, they still work their asses off right now to help my nephew, my sister, to help anything that I ever need. I have 2 kids under 2 now. My mom still shows up. So I feel like the quitting thing was, I don't know, there was no podcast back then, or at least I wasn't listening to them. There was no social media. You didn't hear the word grind a lot. You didn't hear a lot of that stuff, you know what I mean? It was like, I didn't have another option, but I also enjoyed it. It didn't feel like a grind. You know what I mean? I loved the fact that my friends were, man, you coming out tonight or whatever? Because, it was 23, 24, and it was like, hey, I ain't going to be there until 10:30 or 11. You know what I mean? Because I could work that hard, do everything, do that, and then come back to work at 5 a.m. and still absolutely kill it and do it again. Yeah. Because I was like, nobody else is doing this, and I actually loved it, So it didn't seem like a sacrifice at the time, Yeah. It's funny because after I lost my partner, Steve Marlo, like we'll probably talk about a lot in this podcast, probably have him on one day, but we had to figure out how I'd own my own building. So for this company, for us to not hustle our athletes as far as like overcharging or for us to be able to give the product that I want to give, but also serve the people I want to serve, we had to find the fine line in between. But from off the field and for the work that I'm putting in and for my family, he's like, hey, you need to own your own space. Whatever that looks like, whether it's the size of this podcast room or whether it's the size of an Axiom one day. So he helped me crunch all my numbers, figure that out. I went to the bank, and the bank said, literally, this is what it's got to look like. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, I can't sign a lease. I can't have any debt. I had no debt. I made sure I got rid of everything. And I was literally like bouncing from place to place to where they'd let me stay at their house for a few months, at a time. And I remember I didn't really have a spot. Gibson Berryhill, who's an OG like you, he came and he saw behind the desk, I had my laundry basket back there, and he was making fun of me, and he didn't know what was going on, and I just told, I just got to figure it out. And his parents are just great people, big mentors of off the field as well, and they called me, gave me a little 1-bedroom place to stay, and from there, went as hard as I possibly could. Like, okay, I got to figure out how to get into our own space. 1, peace of mind. 2, if things weren't going well with Axiom, just number side. I don't blame them, but things weren't going to the direction that I thought we were going to go. And I wanted to put one in every single one of them. I needed a bigger space, and they didn't have the same vision that I had.
Yeah.
We weren't making shit back then, so I don't blame them. I probably would have been the same if I was them. It's been 5 years now, so I got to remember my story straight. From Axiom, we had 2 weeks to get into it. And I had 2 coaches at the time, Bryce and Dylan, who were absolute savages, grinders.
Dogs.
And they're like, hey, we're moving in 2 weeks, the first week of summer. And I'm like, it's not going to be ready yet. They're like, well, we already told everybody you're going to do it. So my dad and me, we installed the turf, we installed the flooring, we put together the racks. My homie Jake Miller, probably having the podcast too, he helped me build the racks. I'm literally painting the floors with the Fleck. That midnight, the night before, it was 100 degrees, so we couldn't do it before. The tanners were helping me paint it. And we opened up the next day, and it was crazy because first day, we have a picture in the gym. It was full. And literally, like, I almost started crying that day because I was scared. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to fill this. Long story short, about 2 years into leasing the place, I had a chance to buy it. The owner left, and how it was working, I had a first right of refusal. I had 30 days to be able to own that building, and I'm like, this is the spot that I could have forever, you know what I mean? And I need to have it, and it's the space we're still in now.
That was kind of your goal on what Steve had said. You need your own building.
100%.
And just to clarify, this is the current off the field location in Meridian.
Yeah,
same spot.
This is the headquarters, I guess, as you would call it. Yeah, cool. The big one. And I go to the bank, said, hey, I'm ready, I got this, you know what I hear? And then they told me, no, you don't. And I was like, it was I was knocking on gyms that were in business saying, hey, you going out of business so I could take over your lease? Because I had a full lot of people. I was going to have nowhere to train them. I was going to have nowhere to coach them. So we were literally 30 days from getting evicted because somebody else had put an offer on the building after the previous owner left, and I only had a 30-day first right of refusal. Wow. Day 27 was a Wednesday night. I'm literally thrown up like at 11 o'clock at night. Didn't have they didn't have an answer. Day 28, like the 8th bank that I asked, after hours, 10 p.m. The guy, there was a banker, literally goes, well, you better effing come through on this deal, and he approved it, which was crazy. Right. It was almost 100% financed. I don't know how he gave it to me, and it was really cool. Within the first year, we just killed it. After that, he said, well, we're going to buy another one. And nice. But it was crazy, you know what I mean? I mean, I literally threw up on a Wednesday night because I was trying to figure out how to buy this place and do this.
3 days, or else you were no longer going to have the building or the space for all the kids that you had kind of built up.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It was nuts.
So that was, 5 years ago is when you got the current headquarters, I guess?
Yep. So 5 years ago, we moved into this place, which I kind of got to give a lot of that credit. And you're talking about not giving up. Like, I met my wife. I didn't know she was my wife. Well, actually, I did. It was literally like first day. I even told one of my boys, I was like, he's like, you're hanging out with her again? And then he's like, oh, you're going to marry this girl. And I was like, actually, I might. And it was week 1. And we pretty much started hanging out, never stopped hanging out afterwards. But she kind of gave me some sort of peace. I used to always just stress, which you guys probably still think I stress. It was way worse back in the day. Yeah. Like, literally, my shins would sweat. You ever heard of that? I haven't. But my shins would sweat, A lot of that was because of my partner almost losing the business that one time, almost losing the building. But But she kind of just gave me some sort of peace, and I felt like I kind of had to prove it to her that, look, I am this badass. It kind of goes back to me being insecure, which is kind of why I wanted to start the podcast. I feel like the stuff I've dealt with and the stuff I've seen these elite athletes deal with, it's the same thing all these kids are dealing with, these insecurities. I mean, 100%. Most of our motivation is either, fear or success, but most of the time it's fear to me that has motivated me more. Me not getting to this point.
Yeah.
If I don't do this, I'm not going to get here.
Being scared to lose.
And I thought I was going to lose her if I wasn't a badass, which I don't think that would have happened. But she was a huge part of my motivation, plus a huge part of my peace. It was almost like when I wasn't working, I really wasn't working.
Yeah.
She was the first thing that helped me separate.
Escape a little bit.
Which I think helped me when I was back at work. I focused a ton.
Cool.
So, we've been in that space for 5 years. The place looks completely different now. We went through COVID, which we can talk about here in a little bit. But we went through COVID, got some outdoor turf, and then, about a month ago, we just opened up a new space, which we wouldn't be able to do if it weren't for all the staff and the coaches and everybody that I have,
Yeah, okay, so maybe to rewind and talk less about like the grind and what you kind of had to go through to build up Off the Field's name. Tell me some like influential athletes that maybe were some first athletes of Off the Field that maybe helped build that or that kind of motivated you to keep going and that you were able to really connect with and change them for the better. So and then obviously that would probably lead to them telling their friends, Taylor's the man, he changed people's lives. Maybe a couple of influential athletes that were staples and that helped kind of build OTF.
Yeah, I mean, I've probably told this story a bunch, but one of the most influential athletes, maybe individuals that we've ever had with Off the Field is Cody Riley, your best friend, our first GM.
Yeah.
Same thing. I got to coach him on that baseball team with you, but he didn't start working with me with Off the Field. I might not even had Off the Field at the time, This goes back to me teaching these PE classes for free. I was in those classes and he knew who I was, because our dads, I was lucky we had a relationship there. He knew who I was. I'm literally teaching these PE classes where it's like the coach doesn't really care what we do, but I'm like, okay, I got to hype these kids up. There's like 80 kids in the class, and we did a lot of stuff where looking back wasn't super motivating, you know what I mean? But like it was like, again, we had the juice, we were yelling, doing everything I possibly could. And a lot of you guys didn't trust me, but Cody did because they're our family. Maybe didn't trust me. His dad might have just said, "Hey, go try Taylor out. Let's do a favor for Rod," type of deal, But those PE classes literally made Off the Field. If people want to ask how to grow a performance company, show up at school.
Yeah.
I mean, you get in front of the kids, and then if the kids don't show up, it means you got to switch your strategy because you're not doing something in front of the kids.
Not enough juice.
Going back to Cody though, I didn't know it at the time, but now it's like, this is what I try to hone in on. This is what is made Off the Field. This is what I love about it, is literally the consistency of work. You know what I mean? So Cody, his high school coach told him when he was a junior that he was never going to play college baseball. He's an 8-hole hitter, probably hitting underneath 200. Sorry for telling everybody, Cody. And he went to his coach and wanted to play college, and his coach said, "Hey, probably not going to make it." And he kind of came to me almost tearing up, and was like, "Hey, man, my coach said I can't play college ball." And I'm like, can you blame him? I mean, if we look at it realistically, don't blame it on the coach. I mean, this is where we're hitting. Yeah. You're in the A-hole, He did have a little bit of a struggle because he had you and 3 other Division I baseball players on one team, which is rare, So he might have been a star on a different team, but, he was kind of not at the time. And he's like, "Well, what do I do?" And I was like, "Well," I had no idea, and I was like, "Well, we can either you just go to school, have fun and go to college, you're a smart kid, or we work as hard as we possibly can and see what happens." And the kid never made an excuse. Like, still to this day, never has made an excuse to me. We might have mother effed each other a few times and got into it, but he's never been like, "Oh, I couldn't do this because of this." And I recognized it back then. Like, so he ate everything I told him to eat. He worked out probably more than he should have. Like I said, back in the day, I was just beating kids up more than I should have. But he was working out twice a day, hitting all the time, doing everything he possibly could. Put on like 34 pounds. Some of that might have been for puberty. I took all the credit, but it was probably because of puberty. But he showed up that year, balled out, ended up, I think, leading off. Yeah, leading off. Ended up playing 4 years of college baseball. An absolute stud, team captain at the junior college level. You know what I mean? He just was an absolute stud. And then he ended up being the first person I ever hired that wasn't a coach for us, because I was always worried about, like, payroll. I'm not going to be able to make it. If you're not training sessions, I can't pay for you. But Cody had so much his quality was so big, his upside was so big. I was like, okay, he's going to be our first GM ever, and I gave him almost zero framework. You know, he had to kind of figure out, create the role himself, and he did, and it was all because of work. And he literally has been like the epitome of it. You know, now anybody that we've had that has had success has been like that. You know, the Isaiah Wrights, you know, Destiny Slocum. You know, people always talk to us about the pro athletes. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't have a lot of high-profile names like the Tom Brady's or, you know, Odell's or stuff like that. But most of our guys had to grind and go get it. And if you watch our pro athletes, and I think about the difference that I see between some teams or some individuals and compared to them, is that everything they do, the standard and the work that they put in it, the level is so much higher. To where even when they're foam rolling, it has a purpose. When they're warming up, they have a purpose. David Moe was in today. Like, if you've been around him and met him, like, he has not had the easiest road. Works harder than anybody. He's literally just doing a warm up, and he's working on his hands like he's on the defensive line. He's going through it the entire time. You know. Yeah. So his intent and his consistency with work is crazy. And I think Cody was my first athlete that ever did that. And really, Cody built us. The Mountain View baseball team didn't really trust us. Cody showed up looking like a unit. Again, puberty might have had to have a little something for it. Good genetics might have had some, but he got after it. And I just was luckily the guy that helped him be the bridge to get there. And now watching so many kids do that now has been the most rewarding. It's been awesome. I mean, that's why I do Off the Field. That's why I started this podcast. Really, this whole podcast is about trying to show people human performance and not just athletic performance. I've been able to get mentored by guys, 100 millionaires, you know what I mean, that some came from nothing, some were given something, but the ones that I still hang around are the ones that just outwork everyone. I was at a meeting with a guy who owns half a Meridian, and he's willing to sit down with me from 10 to midnight on a Tuesday because he couldn't meet with me until 10 p.m. because he was working from 6 to 10 and he already owns it. But he loved it. His energy was there. You know what I mean? And that guy just continues to work, and he's a great dad. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so that's what I'm going to try to show on this. You know what I mean? Is that no one, even if you're given something, if you want to get to a next level, the only thing that it's going to come from is work. And I keep trying to look at the common denominator, like it's 100% work. Some people do work smarter, but doesn't mean you work less. Like if you're trying to do it. Oh, the Kobe Bryant quote. So I just actually mentored and did a course with a community college, right? And they're basketball players, so they all know the Kobe Bryant quote, to where it's like, hey, everybody else would, wake up at 8, train from 10 to 12, and then one more time at night. Mm-hmm. He'd wake up 2 hours early to get a whole nother session in because there was somebody ahead of him that was better than him, but they were only working out twice a day. Kobe started figuring out how to outwork him. Yeah. And if everybody's heard the quote, but I think if you think about it as far as leverage goes, in a year's time, he's literally done 356 more workouts than somebody else. That's a year's more of work. Yeah. And 2 years and 3 years, and it just compounds, right? Going. To where even though I wasn't given anything in business-wise, even though I wasn't, I had no idea what a P&L was, even though I was crazy unathletic. We didn't have the crazy high-level athletes back then. I was like, there's got to be a way to figure it out. There's people that are doing it. Mm-hmm. I can do it. I'm going to work harder than them, or I'm going to just work as hard as I possibly can until the job's done to be able to make sure that we can get to where we want to get to. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the kids that I see have that success are those guys. We have a lot of kids that get a Pac-12 offer, well, whatever the Pac-12 is now, but or get an offer from a big school, but they haven't had to work for it, and they show up, and it's a shell shock. Yeah. You know what I mean? The Cody Rileys, the ones that have had to grind, and then their senior year they grow, and then they get a shot, those are the ones that flourish, you know? And then every now and again, and luckily in our industry, because people are, investing in us to work with us, the ones that have the crazy talent but also work like that, those are the guys that got a chance to get paid. Yeah. Those are the guys in business that, you don't even realize how successful they are because they're not trying to push it on anybody else. They're just working. They're just in it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's something I didn't get at the time, but I've learned from my parents, and then I've learned through this job and watching these kids, and now learning how to reflect and watching what makes my coaches like you and my other guys, elite and better, is that my elite coaches work harder than everyone else. And never complain, you know. Auggie hurts himself, or one of your athletes hurts, it eats you up at night. You figure out how to fix it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or we lose a game, it eats at us, and it's like, okay, it's not it was their fault or the coach's fault. It was on us. And we got to figure out how to own that and how to get better. You know what I mean? And being able to, I mean, really, that's why I want to do this podcast. I want to show some people the stories that I've learned and been fortunate enough to be around. And again, I was really fortunate in my upbringing and seeing some great role models and some people in my upbringing in business that have shown me that it's not just going to come. Nobody's going to give you a handout, but if you work for it, you can go get it, like anything. I'm not saying a 5'8" kid can play left tackle in the NFL, but if you work for something, you can go make it happen.
Yeah. I think it is good to see. I mean, as you said earlier, I'm pretty close with Cody Riley and have kind of, been around and followed his story throughout his, sports career and now his life career. But and guys like that just consistently put in the work and they don't have any excuses. They just keep climbing the ladder. There's no stagnant. There's no droop below. Yeah, there's probably going to be some hard times where you get sick or whatever it may be. You're not feeling like wanting to work out right now, but it's like you consistently put in the work and you're just going to continue to climb the ladder. Cody got better and better every year throughout his full college career. He may have not even reached his peak, but maybe the game told him that he did. But even now, as he's starting life, starting a family, he just continues to be a better guy, to be a harder worker, to be a better dad, to be a better husband, and that kind of environment is incredibly motivating and contagious, I think, and that's something that I think you've built at Off the Field. Even just walking in there, you can just feel the energy and the motivation and the readiness to work, which I think is cool. So that, is a good stream from you that hopefully with this podcast we're able to, touch even more lives than we have just in the gym. So
yeah.
Speaking of maybe some little curveballs that get thrown at us throughout the work, you had mentioned COVID earlier. What tell us about that? What was COVID like for Off the Field?
Yeah, COVID ended up being a blessing for us. You know what I mean? And again, when you're in the thick of it, like the kids right now in high school and college, like all you're thinking about is playing, winning. You know what I mean? Which I get, and you got to be in. But now being, in the position that I'm in, and trying to mentor you guys, trying to get you guys to be in better positions than me, trying to get our athletes to get to where we want to get to, I've found that like the three biggest things for off the field and for success is like number one, that like I told you that Steve Marlowe taught me, is serve. Make everybody else around you better. And it's so cliche, and you hear coaches say it, but I'm not kidding you. If you can make your teammates better, that will outlast anything. Number two is work, like we were just talking about. And number three is just staying hungry. You know what I mean? We always have to think like we have to be growth oriented. We have to try to get better. Mm-hmm. Whether that's in your sport, I got to get better at running a route. I got to get better at shooting a free throw, or whether that's work and it's in business. So with COVID, no idea what, just like everybody, had no idea what was going to happen. So we tried to keep the doors open as long as we possibly could. We were trying to be safe about it. I had no idea. I never get sick, so I wasn't too worried about it, which, could be right or wrong, but I was like, no, we got to keep going. And sure enough, came down to the day where we had to close our doors, and I was watching what everybody was doing, and everybody was like, okay, we're going to charge for this, we're going to do this, we're going to charge that. And I was like, hey, we're going to give everybody everything that we got. People that don't work with us, we're going to give them programs. We're going to give them stuff for free. Everything that we possibly got. And literally, like, all my coaches were at home. We'd meet on Zoom calls. You were with me.
Oh, yeah.
We would grind every single day, and we were always learning. We were trying to figure it out. It made us so much better. Mm-hmm. The moment the doors opened up, we were too full, especially with COVID. We had people running in the grass, out on the road. We had to open the garage doors. People were out back, forced us to get turf. So COVID was actually awesome. You know what I mean? We, the money, financial side, it sucked, but it taught my coaches, I think, the meaning of the serving and giving. And I think, because I told you guys I was going to pay you no matter what, we were going to figure it out.
For sure.
Whether we had to get construction jobs afterwards or something, we didn't know. But ended up being huge. You know what I mean? And I think, again, those are the three things that now, like, I'd note always do, but that I really want off the field to stay focused on. So, man, I really appreciate you coming in and doing this and really forcing me to do this and making me a better person. I mean, you push me. You're my guy at OTF that holds me accountable, and really appreciate it. And to our producer, Robert, man, you've been a huge staple with Off the Field, and I can't wait to see how many people we can help and see what happens with this. So, episode 1, the standard. Thank you, guys. Yes, sir.
Let's go.